almost as tall as I am. Okay. If you'd like to follow along with me, I'll be reading from the 14th chapter of Matthew, verses 22 through 33. I'm going to read it here, make sure we have the same words. Immediately Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowd. After he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. Later that night, he was there alone. Okay. Hang on. See, that's what we have backup for. Oh, that's right. Okay, my apologies. But he went up. No. But he went up a hill by himself to pray. And when evening came, Jesus was there alone. And by this time, the boat was far out in the lake, tossed about by the waves, because the wind was blowing against it. Between 3 and 6 in the morning, Jesus came to the disciples walking on the water. When they saw him walking on the water, they were terrified and said, "It's a ghost," and screamed with fear. Jesus spoke to them at once. "Courage," he said, "it is I. Don't be afraid." Then Peter spoke up. "Lord, if it is really you, order me to come out on the water to you." "Come," answered Jesus. So Peter got out of the boat and started walking on the water to Jesus. But when he noticed the strong wind, he was afraid and started to sink down in the water. "Save me, Lord," he cried. At once Jesus reached out and grabbed hold of him and said, "What little faith you have! Why did you doubt?" They both got into the boat and the wind died down. Then the disciples in the boat worshiped Jesus. "Truly you are the Son of God," they exclaimed. It is such a beautiful day today. Well, how can you tell with all the clouds? You can't see the sky. It's kind of dismal. It can't make up its mind if it's going to be sunshiny or cloudy. What's so great about it? Same sky, same weather conditions, but two different perspectives. Man, it is cold in here. I'm freezing. Are you kidding me? I'm sweating bullets over here. Thermostat set on 72 degrees, but it's perceived differently. And I know some of you may be familiar with that darn dress on the internet. Is it brown and blue or is it gold and white? And people were getting in arguments over what color it really was. Now I know we'll argue over anything, and that dress was a prime example. But it was also a sociology lesson to show we all see things differently. The one thing we could agree on was it was a dress. But we couldn't agree on what color it was, because we all saw it differently. Now, perception is reality. It's scientifically proven. What we perceive is real to us. There's no denying what we see and what we hear. Because we're all created to be different. And in order to be different, we have to perceive things differently. We're going to have different perspectives. God did that on purpose. He didn't want us all the same, because then it'd be super easy to love the neighbor. We're all alike. He created us differently to see how well we could step up to the plate and love each other because of, not in spite of, our differences. But because perception is reality, we subconsciously convince ourselves that the way we see something is really the way it is. And that's okay until you get to where you are pushing your reality on someone else. Well, of course Lynn's shirt's orange. Who can't see that? Well, Tammy might say, I don't know, it looks more like salmon to me. Does it matter? No. But we could get in a fight over what color it is and completely lose sight of the big picture that Lynn's got a shirt on. We get so caught up in arguing over details, we miss the big picture or the common denominator. Today is the first Sunday of Lent, and there are a wide variety of perspectives on how people observe this time of year. Some will actually fast and not eat for a certain amount of time. Some won't eat meat on Friday during Lent. Some go without something, a particular vice they may have, like caffeine or chocolate. I did that once. I won't do it again. I was not a nice person to be around for 40 days of no chocolate or caffeine. But some people will add a healthy habit to their routine. That they pray one extra time during the day, or that they pick one person specifically each day to pray for during that 40 days. And some people will go to church more frequently, not just on Sunday. We just had Ash Wednesday. We'll soon have Palm Sunday and Maundy Thursday and Good Friday. We don't normally have church, at least not in this denomination, that frequently, except during Lent. Whatever we decide to do, we choose it because it works for us. But it may not be what works for your spouse, or your neighbor, or anyone in your family, or even the person in the pew next to you. So does this make your practice more holy and there's less? No. Does it make each of you unique in your faith journey? Absolutely. The big picture, the common denominator, is that you're making an effort to remember Jesus' sacrifice for you. One more area where we find a stark difference of perspectives is in the Bible, all over the Bible. The most obvious being the Old Testament and the New Testament. I don't know about you, but I am really glad we have the New Testament. Because if you've read some of the things that have happened in the Old Testament, I would not want to have to follow some of those rules and traditions. I'm much more comfortable with the love and grace and mercy that Jesus' presence offers. And even within the New Testament, there are still differing perspectives. The 4 books of the New Testament, the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, talk about some of the same stories, but each one of them has their own interpretation. They were each written by different people at different times with their own experiences and backgrounds and their own perspectives. That's not what matters then. What matters was the story, the common denominator, the details of what an inn actually was or wasn't is not as important as the fact they went somewhere. They went several places repeatedly when it was time for Jesus to be born and couldn't find a place. They were facing inhospitable conditions. And the important thing is they finally found a place. It doesn't matter how many places they went or how luxurious they were or weren't. The fact was they had trouble and then they found a place. When the disciples were riding out the storm on their boat, it's obvious they were terrified. And if we were in their position, we would be too. We don't know how big the boat was. We don't know if they were cramped in or if there was room to walk around and pace. I know if there were, I would have been one of the people pacing, wringing my hands, thinking, holy cow, we're about to die. But some of them may have been seated and quiet and praying. Some of them may have been seated and quiet thinking, how did I get here? We don't know because none of that's important. The big picture is they were together in this boat and they were all fearful. And then between 3 and 6 a.m., here comes Jesus walking on the water. You think he chose that time purposefully? Don't know. But if I were to wake up on a rocking boat and see someone walking out on the water, I'd be a little afraid. But Jesus very calmly tells his disciples, don't be afraid. What was the difference? Why were they so terrified and yet he wasn't? And it's because Jesus was secure in his perspective. He knew everything was going to be okay. The disciples were insecure in their perspective because things didn't look great to them. And they were scared. So what is it that makes us insecure? What is it that makes us defensive when someone else tries to challenge our perspective? Now, there could be lots of possibilities, but the thing or the person that can challenge our perspective and make us insecure is anything or anyone that is a threat to our perceived and protected reality. People who are secure in their perspective are the ones like Jesus. Now, secure, I don't mean hard-headed or stubborn or set in your ways, which we've all been there. What it means is that our faith is unshakable. Regardless of what's going on, we are secure, knowing it may look bleak now, but it's going to be okay. Those who are insecure with their perspectives are the ones like the disciples, afraid, fearful of anything that challenges their comfort zone. They're also the people who believe anything and everything that feeds their insecurities. They're not okay with being vulnerable. I'll give you an example, a personal aside here. We can go to great lengths to protect our perspectives and our own realities without even thinking about it. When I was in college, back in the 90s, I had the chance to go see my favorite band in Dallas. Lynn's smiling because he knows who it is. He's heard this story. Any of you who know me know Duran Duran is the end-all, be-all band ever. Ever. If you knew me in high school and you saw my room, you knew. You couldn't see the color of the walls for all the posters. I was obsessed with them. So I go to the concert, and my boyfriend at the time drove me. And we're being very careful to pay attention to what row we're parked in, what parking spot number we're parked in, what entrance we're parked outside of. We're not going to be those fools after the concert that go, ooh, where do we go? However, that happened anyway. After the concert, this life-altering experience, we retrace our steps, and there's no car. And we're thinking, great, we've come all the way to Dallas just for the car to get stolen. And then we realized, oh, this arena's round. Same row number on the opposite side is where the car was. By the time we get to the car, everyone else has left. So as we're pulling onto the freeway, we end up behind a tour bus. No way. Absolutely no way am I this lucky. My boyfriend says, hey, what do you think? Band in front of us? I was like, I don't know. He said, you want to follow it just to see? Okay. No problem. Well, we follow the bus, and a few minutes later it pulls up in front of a real swanky hotel in Dallas. I don't know if it's midtown or downtown, but anyway. They pull up in front of the hotel, and as the bus doors open, the interior lights come on, and it's them. And my boyfriend says, here's your chance, go meet them. And I'm like, okay. And I reach for the door handle and I stop. And he says, aren't you going to go meet them? Yeah, no. He says, what? I was like, yes, I'm going. And I reach for the handle again, nope. And I do this a couple more times and finally he goes, are you getting out or not? And I finally said, no. Because my perspective of this band was so grandiose, and my entire childhood was centered around my reality when I listened to their music I was afraid to meet them and they'd be jerks, and my whole childhood had just been a lie. I was not prepared for my perspective to change. And this is where Peter's interaction with Jesus out on the water can teach us. Very valuable lesson. Because when Peter stepped out onto the boat, he was focused on Jesus. He was zeroed in on him. And he gets out of that boat and he starts walking. And then all of a sudden, he gets in his head and realizes, oh, I'm walking on water. And he gets scared and starts to sink. And Jesus is like, hey, back here I am, come on. Peter changed his focus back on Jesus. Jesus pulled him up, and they got back in the boat, and the storm calmed down, and everything was fine. What we learned from this is that in order for us to keep drowning in the defense of our own perceived realities, we must be like Peter and set our focus on Christ, so we can see things from his perspective. And only then can we be secure in his reality as our common denominator. Amen.